Sadie, welcome back to This is Horror.
Thank you for having me.
So, I was looking at when we last spoke, and it was in fact early 2020. So,
Wow.
yeah, I'm wondering what have been the biggest changes for you, both personally and professionally, since we last spoke in April 2020?
Yeah, so a lot actually. I mean, I was invited to write a book in the early part of 2021. I took a hiatus from all of my writing platforms. So like Scream Magazine and Cemetery Dance. So I haven't been reviewing as much since 2021. Um, I wrote my book in 2022. So I pretty much dedicated most of that year to reading a lot of horror that I maybe have missed out on. And it was a great year. I spent a lot of time reading instead of writing book reviews because I was writing for the book, my book. And Nightworms was continuing to grow since then. So, we have a lot more subscribers since 2020, although we grew exponentially in 2020. That was a great year for us because with all the COVID quarantine and shutdowns and everything, people really needed those horror books delivered to their door because they weren't able to like go to physical bookstores and things. So we did grow quite a bit. And we thought the wheels would fall off of publishing. Like we thought, just like everything else, like the publishing industry was probably going to slow down, but it kind of amped up as well. So that was good. It was a good time for publishing, for horror publishing. 2020.
Yeah, yeah. And already you've given me so many directions that I can go in. I want to know what was the initial impetus for the hiatus in terms of reviewing? Because, in terms of the non fiction book, you said that that came a little bit later. So, why did you initially decide, let's stop reviewing for a bit?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you're just in you have your head down and you're doing the work, like you don't really think that people are aware of everything that you're doing. And I do a lot. Like I during 2020 I had a Patreon that I was managing. I have Nightworms. I had several different reviewing platforms. So I had a lot going on. And the reason why I took a hiatus from the reviewing is really just to focus more on reading and writing the book. Because I also write articles for different platforms as well, like the lineup and Lit Reactor. And all of that takes a lot of time. Like I put a lot of extensive research and time into writing those articles. And so that would always detract from other things that I needed or wanted to do. Um, and I really have been back really lightly. I have written a few like articles for the lineup and Lit Reactor since taking a hiatus. But I haven't gone back to my reviewing publications. I haven't gone back to Cemetery Dance or Scream Magazine. Um, I don't know. It just kind of feels like a conflict of interest at this point as well. Like I'm also working for a publisher. I'm working for Pandy Press, which is owned by Casey Lansdale. So I'm doing social media work for them. I'm curating horror for my own imprint called Dark Heart through Dark Matter magazine. Although that's experiencing a new transition too, which I haven't announced yet, so I really can't talk about it. But um, yeah, just things move and shift and change, and then I have to make adjustments so that all of the different things that I'm doing aren't in competition with each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When are you going to make the Dark Heart announcement?
Very soon, like if not this week, then probably next week.
Is this something we could talk about now? Because this will be airing after.
Oh, maybe so. Yeah, well, maybe I should go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, so what's happening? What is the big change?
Okay, so Dark Heart is an imprint, and an imprint is different than being a publisher. So I think that sometimes that can be confusing for people. So when people saw that Dark Heart, that I was the editor in chief of Dark Heart, I think they automatically assume that that has something to do with publishing horror. And while it is an aspect of publishing horror, I am not the institution behind it. I'm not the money behind it. I'm not funding it. I'm not in the production part of it. I'm mostly just curating for a line of novels. And it was going really well. And, you know, I enjoyed acquiring work for Dark Heart. Um, but other offers have kind of since come about, and I feel more suited for those. So, yeah, we're just going to transition Dark Heart into more of a curated line that is similar to what I did with my Dark Library for Cemetery Gates. And so all the novels that I acquired and novelettes that I required for Dark Heart are going to be like my Dark Library. And then this new position that I'm taking on with something else is in the curation department as well. So I just I felt like the confusion between like, oh, Dark Heart is a publishing company, like it wasn't. And so I felt like there was some confusion there, and that um I'm more suited towards the curation part, if that makes sense. I'm trying to be really careful with my words, but if that makes sense. If you have any questions, like let me know.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does make sense. And we certainly see why you're still also taking a back seat with the reviewing because now you have so much more
Yeah.
to take on. But not only that, as you say, it's like the potential conflict of interest. And yeah, I mean, it's a gray area being a reviewer and a writer or a curator or a publisher. And I mean, the same with me. I guess I started out more reviewing, and then as I'm getting things published, I was like, that just felt it wasn't really working for me doing the two. But I actually, on the topic of reviewing, I love what I've seen you've been doing recently, which is if you mention something on Goodreads, there's no stars. So it's just here's the text. Here are some thoughts. And me and Bob have been saying for a long time just how arbitrary the star system is anyway, because like it almost it just seems to belittle, in a sense, the entire review. And how do you say what is a three or a four? What is a four or a five? It's such a small scale anyway. And even to start hierarchically ranking these books, I mean, how would one possibly say whether My Heart is a Chainsaw is better than A Head Full of Ghosts? They're just completely different books doing different things. So I love that you've done that, and I think yeah, we want people to have our thoughts on a book rather than just focusing on this star system.
Yeah, I think that the reviewing, you know, just calling it even a review
Hmm.
has put like expectations on the person talking about the book that really don't need to be there, especially for Goodreads, which is just a very casual environment for readers to put their thoughts out there for other readers to enjoy. I feel like there's this distance and this sort of like animosity between the author and the reviewer, um, where there's even just like a lot of fighting and bickering that goes on in social spaces over, you know, well, this reviewer said this and this author is behaving badly and all this stuff that goes on. And I really think it's because of all the expectations that come with the word review and the star rating system. So instead of, you know, a an author reading an entire review and just understanding that this is a response to the book, which is totally valid. Like when we're listening to music or we're watching a movie, like we all respond. Like we all have thoughts that are going on in our head, and these are just a written kind of expression of what this person felt while they were reading or watching or listening, to some sort of artistic expression. So to say that that's a review is just a it's a stretch at the least, and then it's just so much more at the most, because it's not a critical review. Oftentimes it's not in a magazine, it's not trying to bear any weight, it's not suggesting that there needs to be changes made, it's not calling into question the author's like ability. Like they might do all of those things, sure, but I think that it just is creating this like over exaggeration of what these responses on Goodreads really are, which people are able to just respond critically to things that they're listening to or be positive about, like, and they can just gush. Like all of my early reviews are really just gushing about things that I enjoyed. There's no real there's no real thought or intention put into a lot of my early reviews. I'm basically just kind of telling my mom to read a book or not, because I started in 2012 and would just be like, Mom, this book was so good. Oh my God, read it. That's not a review. That's a fucking response.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's funny because you have these people that they write these casual reviews and they try to make them at the same level as somebody who's a professional critic, and there's a difference there. And professional critics write for newspapers, the new and news outlets and things like that. They do it for clicks, they do it for advertising, they do it for money, but they also have an opinion. And these people have seen or read hundreds, thousands of books, and so they have valid interpretations and things like that. And you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but the average reviewer sees that and says, I can do that too. And usually it's like, no, you can't. Sorry. And it kind of goes back to one of the reasons, like what Michael was talking about, why I don't write reviews. I'd love to. I would only review things I like, and I got tired of trying to figure out how many different ways I could say you need to buy this book. You know, because it's usually what it amounts to. It's like, hey, did you like it? You need to buy it. Do you want me to buy it for you? I mean, because I need you to read it. If you need me to buy it for you, just say the words. I'm like, no, I can get it. Okay, read it, and I'm gonna hound you about it because I thought it was good. I want that author to be able to reap the rewards of that. But casually on Goodreads, and then the star system, what are you going to give them 3.47 stars? How does that actually work? Was it a 3.64?
Well, and they don't even
you
give you the
know?
half stars, Goodreads doesn't
Right.
even give you that ability. So, yeah, like Michael was saying, the difference between a 3 and a 4, I was just starting to get really annoyed with the fact that I was even having to decide, like, is this a 3 or a 4? So, I really just wanted people to read the
Mm-hmm.
words behind what I was saying, and it has really helped shape the way that I think about books and the way that I think about writing, and able to just communicate to other readers how my experience went. Like, I listened to an audiobook. Here's how I felt about the narrator. Here's how the
Mm-hmm.
story made me feel, you know, mood wise, or what the aesthetics were like, or what I was doing when I was reading it. And, other books and movies that came to mind while I was hearing the book or reading the book. Like, those are the things readers really want to know. They
Right.
don't really want to hear you, drag an author for whatever hot take is, this
Mm-hmm.
book is conjuring up for you. Like, in my opinion, I mean, I'm sure there's some people that show up for that, but that's not what I was doing.
No, books make us feel. We should be able to express those feelings in a way without having some type of, objective standard on a subjective medium.
Yes, agreed.
As happens quite a lot in this podcast, I will have to respond to something Bob said, suggesting that perhaps people reviewing on Goodreads can never be kind of as good as those who are so-called professional reviewers, and I just disagree with that. And I know, as with all of these times where I pedantically call out Bob, that this was not Bob's intention at all. But of course there are people who are so-called not professional reviewers, and it's almost a silly distinction anyway, because there's no qualification that means you are now
Right.
a pro reviewer. But there are definitely people who review on Goodreads, and they put far more time and consideration and critique into the review than somebody who, I don't know, had a little column in a newspaper and they were clearly just kind of reining it in. And I would even question, did they actually read the book or watch the
Mhm.
film that they seem to be attempting to review anyway? So I know what you mean, but I don't
Yeah, I
also
mean, I
want
didn't
to
want.
sully. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to sound like I was putting those professional, people who actually do it for a living on some kind of pedestal and then belittling people. There's obviously, I'm people who can write, really, really great reviews, and be critical and hit the highs and lows, the goods and the bads, and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking in general terms and in
Mm,
broad general terms. So that kind of, yeah, I mean, it's that was my intention on the statement.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I agree too. Like, there is a distinction to be had, because if you do look it up and you look up book reviewer or whatever, like it does make a distinction about like something that's in like a newspaper or a magazine has like a critical slant, and it's not even about money being exchanged, because we know that some of the bigger platforms, the publishers or the authors have to pay for those um, reviews. Like it's not just those platforms picking up whatever book and deciding to review it. Like it has to be paid for, which could definitely muddy the water. Like and so uh, it's a whole big thing. And I think that there are really good reviewers, both professionally because they are being paid to do so for a platform, and unprofessionally on Goodreads, who have wonderful reviews that I take as gospel. Like there are certain people that I follow where if they like something, I generally go and buy it because I just love their recommendation, regardless of where it's published.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel when I went from reviewing and not being paid to reviewing and being paid, the reviews were pretty similar. It wasn't as
Yeah,
if
same here.
they changed.
Yep.
But that I did have, or I have had, two kind of incidents that showed the potential corruption that money can have. I mean, I was aware of this before. I've not been living in this world so naively that I'm like, what? Money and power are used to disadvantage and advantage different people? But no, two separate incidents. One, I was writing for a publication and I turned in my very honest review, as I often do, and they didn't want to accept it because the person had paid to advertise in the issue that this review would be going out in, and they're like, can you change the review, can you make it more positive? And I was like, no, absolutely not. This is one of the worst
Yep.
books that I've ever read. And I
Yeah.
think as well, back in those days, I mean, over a decade ago now, possibly influenced by my old and not so long term co-host John Costello, I would be very in your face with my negative criticism in a way that I would not do now. And it's like probably a bit unnecessary to be so well, potentially rude about it. Um,
Yeah.
but I just thought, no, like you're paying me to write a review, so I'm writing a review. This is my honest opinion. This is what you're getting. And then on the other end, and this has happened a number of times. Yeah, I've contacted publications about review, and then they've said, well, if you take out our advertising, then we can also run a review of your book. And it's like, no, no, that is, yeah, there was one time when a very reputable publication in the UK did that to me. And it's like, we're not playing that game.
Yeah.
I'm here to see if you want to review it. But yeah, I mean, I almost respect more the publications that are at least honest and say, all our reviews are paid for. At least you're being transparent rather than trying to package it in with advertising. Now,
Yeah.
I still, at the moment, I wouldn't pay to get a review, and I wouldn't accept money to review something either. And I mean, I'm very clear as well when people take out This Is Horror podcast advertising, or they ask for reviews and we're having the same conversation. It's like neither are contingent on the other. So these are not related at all. If you take out advertising, that doesn't mean you're more likely to get a review or appear on the show. But if you don't, that doesn't mean you're somehow not going to be on the show or reviewed either. These are separate things. And I think, yeah, it can almost be, it can muddy the waters when you're offering both services anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, just to make a distinction, like I do get paid for reviews, and it isn't to make the distinction, it's not being paid to review it in a certain way. So it's mostly just because you need compensation for the time and effort that you are putting into writing a review, just like an author gets compensation for writing. So that's the distinction. Yes, there are paid reviewers out there. That doesn't mean that they are being bought and sold. It means that they are being compensated for their time and energy to write the review is the difference.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
And I don't
compensation is
know
coming
if in
from the
my
publisher.
I
Correct.
don't I don't know if in my early morning spiel I misspoke there, but I'll clarify. Yes, of course, I get paid to review. What I'm saying is I won't take money to write a favorable review. So
That, yes,
Yeah.
that
exactly
is the
right.
distinction.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, with all these publishing tangential ventures that you have, what is dividing up your time in the publishing sphere going to look like going forward? Because, of course, you mentioned the work that you've been doing for Cemetery Gates Media, for Dark Heart, now the new venture. Is it all shifting towards the new venture, or are you dipping a little in, a little bit here, a little bit there? I mean, it is always remarkable and very admirable just how many things you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes from the outside, it might look like I'm just kind of like trying everything and doing everything. But to be honest, from the inside, to give you the inside scoop on how this all plays out, I need to try things in order to see how they fit. Like I need, if I'm having opportunities come at me, I don't want fear or a wrong assumption or, a misunderstanding of the industry or what the business looks like to, cloud my judgment on whether or not something would be a good fit for me. So I just try it, I just try to see what it's like. And if it doesn't really suit me, or I'm not having fun, or I don't feel like I'm contributing anything to the industry in that capacity, then I just let that go and I try something else. So I think that that was the lesson that I've learned with different things that I've tried. Like, reviewing, I will always read and write my response because I love sharing those with other people. So whether or not I'm in a paid venue or not, I will always be sharing. Right now, I'm sharing those first and foremost on Patreon So my Patreon audience gets all of my reviews first, and then I cross post them to Goodreads or Amazon. And I'm not currently being paid to do reviews unless I pitch something to Lit Reactor or the lineup. So that's what I'm doing on the reviewing front. And then in the publishing front, like, I just learned that the business side of the table is just not for me. Like, it takes up a lot of time. It moves very slowly. Like, I just wasn't having a lot of fun in that regard. Like, I just don't want to be on that side of the table. So I decided to sort of let that lapse, let that go. And I'm in really good professional relationships with a lot of people where we have honest conversations about these things. Um, so, Rob Carroll at Dark Matter Magazine and I just have conversations periodically. Like, how are you feeling? How is this working for you? Like, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And we just have these conversations openly and honestly. And we've just let that transition into, okay, she curated a line of novels. She acquired, 5, 6 novels for Dark Matter Media. Now she's going to move on and do something else. And this new venture is more in the line of curation. Um, and Nightworms is always going to be a fun thing. Like, we're going into our 5th year of business. Ashley and I love working together. We love curating the packages. We have a lot of fun doing that. So that's always going to be there. I do love writing, like writing 101 horror books before you're murdered. I do love that. I would love to do that again. But it does take up a lot of time, and it takes up a lot of time that I like to spend reading. So, I mean, I'm not going to jump whole hog into an author role, but I will take opportunities here and there.
You saying that you've been running Nightworms for 5 years. I'm almost surprised that it hasn't been longer in a very complimentary way, because I feel that in those 5 years, Nightworms, it's become part of the fabric of the horror fiction community to a point where it almost feels like, well, Nightworms, didn't that always exist? Hasn't that been there since the dawn of time? And yeah, so it is
Thank you.
remarkable to take stock and to think, you formed this 5 years ago. If you'd have said it was 10 years ago or longer than that, I would have believed you.
Oh, that's very complimentary. I mean, we do have a lot of fun with that business. And Nightworms, I'm really proud to say, is one of the largest purchasers of indie horror fiction. Like, there's just no one can compete. Like, there's bookstores and brick and mortar stores, and sure, Barnes and Noble makes some purchases here or there, but we buy a large volume of indie horror fiction at one time. It's a sizable purchase, and we believe in supporting indie fiction and supporting indie artists. We custom request our artwork from various different artists for the bookmarks. Well, we have an in-house designer that we've had for quite some time who does all of our bookmarks. But for the stickers, for the magnets, we go outside and try to find, suppliers of tea and coffee, and they're always, pretty much small mom pop businesses. Like, we believe really firmly in supporting that. And so, yeah, we're really proud of it. We're proud of the fact that, like you said, it just seems like it's always been like a part of the fabric of the horror industry and just keeps those wheels turning. We want to make sure that indie is always an option for readers, and that there's not just a traditional market deciding what is available for readers.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing, particularly about the day that we're living in and digital innovations, is that indie will now always exist. We have the tools, the gates are open, they ain't closing. And
Yeah.
so we've now got, so many routes to hear about these books, to buy these books, to publish these books. And I think it's so exciting. And I love that we have these two options anyway. And we're seeing a lot of writers as well go the kind of hybrid author route, which I think is really, really exciting too. I mean, Gemma Remore springs to mind. The UK author David Moody has been doing a kind of hybrid model for his entire career. At Adam Neville, I was going to
Yes,
include
Adam
him as a,
Neville,
a hybrid author, but Adam has really shifted towards indie these
which is
days. Like,
great. I love it for
yeah,
him. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, he actually was, I believe, before being published, he was working within publishing. He was working for Virgin, so he's seen the kind of inner workings, and he's decided to opt for the indie route anyway. Chuck Wendig is another almost OG of the hybrid model, and the more options we have as both writers and readers, just the better everything is.
Yeah, and there's really no difference in terms of purchasing too. So like just from a purchasing standpoint, we worked with Adam Neville to carry the vessel in one of our Nightworms packages, and it was just as seamless, if not better, working with Adam to get his book in our package than it was working with a rep from a large Big Five publisher. I mean, we had custom service. Like, we were able to email Adam and talk to him about, ordering and the best possible way to ship it, and, everything from every point of production to getting it here to my house to him signing book plates, like the whole 9 yards. Like, he was his own best advocate for his work, and to have that line of communication directly to the author and then bring it right to his audience, it was amazing, and we would do it again in a heartbeat. So he is definitely going like his doing his uh, packaging horror in the way that he wants to, and he has all the decisions of the covers and the production and everything is his, and I think that's powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, Adam Neville's books always looked very distinctive, but I think since forming Ritual Limited, he has taken the game to a whole new level. And
Yes.
every single book, it looks like an iconic kind of heavy metal, black metal cover. And I know that that's exactly the type of music and what he's into, but it's so fucking cool, which is
It
maybe
is.
not the most intelligent observation to make, but sometimes you gotta say, it's fucking cool, man. And
It
Mm-hmm.
is.
that
I
is what it
agree. It's
is.
fucking cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy because it took traditional publishing to die in horror for indie to come back, and now traditional publishing is trying to emulate what indie and small press has done. And I always find that fascinating because everything shifts and morphs and things like that. We're on a high. The, Probably, if I had to guess, we're probably right at the peak of a long shift in horror fiction. This thing's going to probably go out for a long time. How long, I don't know. Uh, I'm not an expert on that. There's other people who have guesses. Some of them lean to the negative, some of them lean to the positive. I feel, me personally, that this is going to be a wave that we're going to be able to ride for many, many years. And I just think to me, it's almost funny how traditional publishing is trying to copy something that they ruined to begin with. In the '90s, it's like, guys, y'all screwed this up the last time. Please don't screw it up again. you know.
I don't think it will be screwed up because we're seeing as well just more, what on earth is the word, but kind of subdivisions within bigger companies. So,
Right.
I mean, you look at Tor Nightfire, and so then they're employing these really passionate, lifelong horror advocates and writers and editors. So, I think if you put the right people behind the publishing house and you put fans of the genre, people who love this, then it's not going to fail. The time when it starts to fail is when you put kind of, for want of better phrasing, numbers people, just people looking at the bottom dollar. They don't really care about the product. They're trying to just predict trends. And we've said time and time again, if you're looking at what the new thing is, it's going to be unlike whatever the past thing was. So there's no point being like, I don't know, let's make another Harry Potter. Maybe a bad example in this climate now, but it used to be a good example, and it's too early to think of another. But yeah, if you just say another kind of boy wizard book, that's not going to be the new thing, because we've seen that already. The new thing is going to be completely
New.
original. So I don't know. Yeah, new, new.
Yeah,
The
it's gonna
clue
be
is in
all
the
new.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to fail because of the people that we've got behind it. And you know what? If some of these big publishers, if they said, well, we're closing, for example, Tor Nightfire, let's just continue with that, then actually it wouldn't fail, because the people who are passionate, who are working there, would say, okay, we're going to form our own indie press. So I don't see it failing. I think that horror is on the up, and it's going to continue to be on the up. Um, Also, because people like all three of us in this conversation, we won't let it fail. There are enough of us that if stuff starts happening, then it's like, no, we're going to resurrect it. We're going to keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, even the editor who approached me and wrote me an email inviting me to write this book, she works for Page Street Publishing, and this was her first editing venture. And they, I mean, for lack of a better word, took a chance on her and her idea. She pitched it to the board. Page Street Publishing is not an imprint, but they're distributed by Macmillan. So, I mean, it had to find its funding somewhere. And here we are, and the book is out. And we were able to work on this project together. And she had been a longtime follower of my account and is an avid horror reader. I'm an avid horror reader. The two brains came together and we created this book for other horror readers, and it's being supported by a big five company in distribution. So, I mean, there's always, as long as there are fans and eager people waiting to receive horror, then there's always going to be somebody to distribute it.
Yeah, and let's jump in to 101 horror books to read before you're murdered. So, in terms of this email, so I believe it was Alexandra Murphy who
Yes.
emailed you. How did you two first meet, or was that actually your first contact with her?
Yeah, so I opened my Nightworms email and saw that she had written this invitation, and I was just kind of in shock and beside myself. I didn't really believe that what she was asking was what she was asking. I was like, is this for real? Like, somebody's asking me to write this book? And I wrote her back like, let me think about it. This is sounds crazy. Like, let me just give it a thought. And I sat with it and marinated on it for a while and thought, like, I don't know about this, because my big thing has always been like, I don't want to change my conversational voice to write reviews. Like, I just kind of want to do what I do. I want to say, fuck this. I want to say, read this book before you're murdered, kind of thing. Like, I want to be able to have my voice. And I thought, like, the idea of writing like a book that would be published and distributed by Macmillan was really intimidating. I thought, I don't know, they're going to ask me to be professional. They're going to ask me to, like, put on this whole like writer voice that I'm not used to. But they assured me that there would be a meeting and that we would be able to discuss these things. And during the meeting, Alexandra said, like, she was very protective of my conversational tone. She's like, I want Sadie to be able to write this in her voice, the way that she does on Bookstagram. Like, we don't want you to have to change anything about your personality or the way you pitch books to other readers. Like, we really just want what you're doing already in your reviews and on Bookstagram and social media to just be packaged in a book for a wider audience. And once she said that, like, I was sold. Like, I was like, oh, I can do that. Like, I write reviews all the time. If I just have to take 101 of those and stitch them together with like longer introductions like I do for articles, like, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. And when you got the initial pitch, how much information in terms of what they were looking for or what they were suggesting was given? I mean, did you know at that point that it was 101 horror books, or was it more, we like what you're doing, we want a non-fiction horror related book, what have you got? I mean, I'm wondering how, yeah, who came up with what rules or guidance were you given? And, was there much back and forth to get this right, other than, of course, what you've said about, you being clear that you needed to have your conversational tone that you've always had, and to, of course, maintain, what you're known for and your stamp, your authenticity.
Yeah, I mean, we in this meeting we really did have like a meeting of the minds. Like, there were expectations that they thought would be, the most marketable and the most like inclusive to all horror fans. Like, they wanted to make sure that this wasn't super niche, like that this would be embracing of like seasoned horror fans and new horror fans, and like it would meet everyone in the middle. So they had expectations for that. And then I really had a concern that there are so many lists out there on the internet that I didn't want to replicate that in any way. So I thought that this should be a modern list of horror, because I could already potentially see pitfalls that I would find, like trying to include Rosemary's Baby and Psycho and Dracula, that would squeeze out like horror books that I wanted to include that were released, this year. So I was pretty adamant about the fact that it needed to be current, like it needed to be from like 2000 to now. And they were really cool about that. I also felt like it was really important that there should be some author spotlights, because I was already foreseeing myself trying to pick a book from like, you know, on one Alma Katsu book or one Stephen Graham Jones book. And I was like, no, we're going to have like some kind of, here's an author that really represents the genre that has a huge back catalog type of thing. I also wanted this to be very like Stephen King overarching kind of godfather of horror, but not
Mm.
necessarily list any of his books in the 101, because how? Like, there's no way I could ever pick a favorite Stephen Graham or Stephen King. So, like, I wanted to just be able to talk about him, but not really include him on the list. And so there were lots of things that we would just throw at each other like this, where it was like, well, it should kind of be like this. What do you think about that? Yeah, that's good. But what about this potential situation that could come up? So, I mean, I don't really know who there were things going back and forth in the meeting room that were their idea and my idea, and then we really just listened to each other, and came up with a good guideline. And then they were cool. My publishing team would send me, these like outlines, like here's basically what we talked about, because there were so many ideas, like try to fit this into an outline, and then we'll go over that, and then we'll talk about this. So there were lots of milestones and markers along the way that I met during that time.
Yeah, and I love that. Yeah, you made a point of not including Stephen King, but then, as you have done with a number of things in your introduction, you kind of included him by saying that you weren't going to include him, and then mentioning a number of Stephen King stories and books,
Yeah.
like Salem's Lot and like The Talisman, I believe, as well was mentioned. So, I mean, in a way, your book is a little bit like Dan's Macabre, in that you need to make notes as you're reading it, because you're going to reference books at any given time. This isn't the featured book, but I'm just going to make a reference that you might like this one as well. And I would even argue that by mentioning that you weren't going to include House of Leaves and Let the Right One In because they didn't quite vibe with you, that you kind of included them too, because there are going to be people who think, particularly if they haven't read them, like, hang on a minute, Sadie is such an authority on horror. Why didn't she like that? I'm going to have to check them out. And so you're going to get people who will read those as well. So your anti recommendation became a recommendation.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that yes, I definitely there's probably like at least 150 to 200 recommendations in here. There's not just 101 because I do mention a lot of other books. Um, but also that was Alexandra's like vision was to have kind of these like side boxes throughout to kind of break up long portions of text and have like little games or more recommendations or little asides that don't necessarily fit within like the larger conversation, just to make it like more engaging and interactive. So those were really fun to decide like what kind of little side boxes we were going to do throughout the book. And then also it was her idea to have it illustrated. Like I love an illustrated book. And so when she came up with that idea, I was just over the moon. I couldn't believe that that was going to be part of the budget to have this whole thing illustrated, which I think horror and illustrations go together so perfectly. Like to just have that visual just really seals it in people's minds, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, when I was first speaking to your publisher about checking out a review copy, they were insistent that it's like, no, you need to visually see it. Because I'm like, well, we can just have an EPUB. It's like, no, you don't understand. You can't just have the text for this. And
Yeah.
yeah, now that of course I've seen it, that there's a physical copy, maybe you can see it hanging out behind me on the video, kind of in the
I see
center between. Yeah,
it.
but I mean, it looks fantastic. It's so great, and it is a book that I mean, you can read it in any order and you can just pick it up and flick through it for some inspiration and to get like a kind of reading recommendation. And I mean, even if you're well versed in horror, you're probably going to find, even if you choose a random page, that there's going to be things that are referenced that you haven't read yet. So yeah, I guess when there's a book that's so visual, it probably can make you a little bit nervous because it's like you've really got to nail it. Because if you get the aesthetic wrong, then it could destroy the book. But if you get it right, as you most certainly have, then it's like, oh, we're taking this to another level. And I mean, even like the quality of the paper, the finish, it's just so well done.
Thank you. I really just hats off to the artist Marco Fontanelli. Like so when they hired him and they showed me, samples of his artwork, I was like, yes, all day. I love this guy's artwork. It's so good. And then, there were different portions of the book that we wanted illustrated. Like obviously the like overarching like main topics like supernatural, paranormal, natural order, but there's these bigger chapters and then there's like smaller chapters within that, and we wanted big pieces of art for those, and they would send over all of the things that they wanted to have illustrations for, and then he would do sketches and send those back. And every time they would send me his artwork, there was never a time where his art didn't match what was in my mind for these chapters. Like we were just so in sync, and we would didn't even have one conversation, the two of us. Like it was just whatever was in his mind for demon possession was exactly what I would have wanted for it. So, I mean, there's a few in there that are my favorites, like the one for body horror, for example. When I saw that one, I was like, this is exactly what I would want for body horror. Like, it was so weird. Like, I never rejected or sent back to the drawing board any of his illustrations. Like, they really are just so good.
And so you were being sent the illustrations kind of as they were being created. So you're getting a
Yeah.
live kind of version of this book coming to life.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the cover looks is exactly the way it looked in the sketch. Like, for the first time when I first saw it, and it was all in blue sketches, it was all outlined. So I didn't see the color, but he had, he wrote in words like, oh, this is going to be red and this is going to be black. So they showed me the sketch. This is your cover. What do you think about it? And he nailed it on the first time. Like, there was no back and forth. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I don't like the hand popping out of the ground, or I don't like this little spider, or I don't like the way the book looks. Like, I had no notes for him. It was like, yes, it's amazing. I love it. Like, every time, like, he just really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, the cover is iconic. It evokes things such as Night of the Living Dead and Carrie straight away.
Yeah.
It's- yeah, I
Yeah, he
mean,
understood the assignment.
yeah, if anyone sent that, it's like, yeah, that's the one. You've
Yeah.
done it. Sorry, no,
Yeah.
no notes.
No
You've
notes.
done it. Completed. Yeah,
First time, every time. Yes.
yeah. Now, as we've said, there are far more than 101 horror books in this book. Why did you decide upon 101 horror books as the title, and who came up with that?
I think it was Alexandra, and the first title that we had for it for a long time, which is how it was announced in Publishers Marketplace, was 101 horror books to read before you die. But then later on, she was like, I wish we could just do 101 horror books to read before you're murdered. Like, before you die kind of suggests that you have like ample time to read all of these books, but murdered is like you could be murdered at any given time. Like, somebody could come in and, take your life. And so we just kind of like kicked it around, and she was like, I'm just going to ask if that would be appropriate, like if we could do that. And then she came back and was like, yeah, they're they're fine with it. Like, we could totally run with that title if you like it. And of course, I thought it was, great. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was her idea. And 101 just sounds like 100 is just too round of a number. Like, you
Yeah,
need something for horror to be a little off center. So 101's like
yeah,
just that
yeah,
extra.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. 101 is off center, but 114 would be too. Like, what the fuck?
It's just
So,
too
yeah,
random.
you gotta have
Yeah.
some kind of symmetry. Though it would be funny to call it 114 if, like, actually you counted it up and it had 256, because it's like,
Yeah.
what's going on
Whoa, why?
here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
that's cool.
only the only way you could get away with a seemingly random number would be if it wasn't actually random. So you came up with, like, the door in The Shining, for example. Then
Yeah.
now you've got a number that has some sort of meaning.
Yeah, those iconic numbers that show up in horror a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of the subcategories, I mean, I love that too, because not only have you divided it into these broader categories like human monsters, for example, but then you've whittled it down into other subgenres. So, at what point did that part of the process come up? And I mean, did you have a limit to the amount of subgenres you were going to include? Because this is another thing in horror where it's like, well, we could almost have 101 subgenres of horror, but that's slightly overbearing.
Yeah, so this is kind of something that we do on Bookstagram kind of a lot. So when like Ashley and I are recommending books to people on Bookstagram or doing a post um, we kind of categorize things by like their vibe or tropes or subgenres, like already and automatically, just because that just seems to be a way to like narrow down the focus, because horror is so huge right now and there's so many books coming out that to narrow them down to like these kind of like niche subgenres like found footage and even more specific, like books that have creepy kids in it, or a book that has Ouija boards in it. Like if you start finding these little tropes and themes and subgenres, you can really like zero in on an audience that seeks that out, and it becomes like a massive TBR for them, like a to be read pile. um and so I really wanted to have it broken down from the top, down the big things like supernatural and paranormal, and then like zero it into like haunted houses and found footage and all of that, which found footage was a category. But then once I made the list, there were only a few found footage books on it. So we ended up merging those books into other categories, because not one horror book is just in one uh, subgenre, which is why the icons were born in the beginning of the book. Because a haunted house book could also be psychological, could also be body horror, could also have elements of this or that. So I really wanted to be able to filter these books down into several categories so that people who really like horror, but they really love it when the horror deals with like thriller or crime elements, like those things could be filtered down into much narrower categories in order to find like a specific person who likes that particular thing. um so, because that's how I read. Like, if somebody tells me there's creepy kids and it's psychological and there's a murder mystery and there's like a fucked up slasher, like, then I'm like, oh, that's all the things I like. I'm going to read that right now. Versus just like, this is a haunted house book, you know?
I remember when I first heard about the concept of a slasher story in book form, and I thought, surely that's some sort of contradiction. Then I read Stephen Graham Jones, and I was like, "Holy shit, this
No.
can happen!" But I love that, and also found footage. It's like, well, how do you put found footage into a book? But it happens. Gemma Files, experimental film. There you go. There's your answer. And I feel that there are no limits to the possibilities and to the subgenres that can now be formed within horror, and it's such an exciting moment. And I wonder, and I'm completely putting you on the spot here, and this question has only formed as I've started talking, in fact, but are there any kind of subgenres or descriptions of a book where you thought there's no way that you can put that into literary form? I'm going to read it and find out. And then you were blown away. And, you had that kind of moment like I had with Stephen Graham Jones and slashers.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, let's just take your book, for example, The Girl in the Video. Like, so I recommend that book all the time to people who are fans of like Black Mirror and like technology gone awry, or like technology paranoia, because we live in like a very specific time right now where all of that is very fresh and on our minds. And I wouldn't have necessarily thought that a book like that was possible, um, you know, 10, 15 years ago. That's like not something we really would have thought about. Like, oh, social media could be this very scary place, or like all of these people could be accessed to, they could have access to you at a drop of a hat. Like, you wouldn't have necessarily thought of that long ago. But now, right now, when somebody talks about the elements of that are in your book that tap a very specific fear, like, that is so real for so many people who have had like internet stalkers or have had somebody harassing them or whatever. And that is a very like, you know, it causes a lot of anxiety for people. So I would recommend your book to them. Whereas 10, 15 years ago or whatever, like that probably wouldn't have been that visceral of a fear, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's always difficult to know how to respond when someone's answer is recommending something I've done without sounding like terribly pretentious or like I set you up for that. I did not set
No,
you up
that's
for
just
that.
no, I no, I no, I didn't even see it that way. It's just like, like that's just a book I just put in like a whole video for TikTok for people who like Black Mirror episodes, because that book is could be a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, and I love that, 3 years later, people are still recommending it. They're still talking about it. It seems to have tapped into something in a way that other stories of mine haven't to that level, which is obviously not to belittle my other stories, but I think maybe there was something special about the crossover of the very specific technological fears and then throw in the Japan setting and people are like, oh, there's something for
Yeah.
everyone. So I'm glad I did that. I'll try to do that again sometime. But as we said before, you can't force it. You can't fabricate it. If I'd have said, I'm gonna write something with this tick box, then it wouldn't have worked. It would have felt reined in. So it's like John Langan says in terms of story ideas. You just have to accept the story ideas that your brain or the world, depending on how you like to think about it, bring to you, and then you write them. And if you think, oh well, I'm not sure if this one is working or is going to work, write it anyway, because if you're a writer, you're going to keep coming up with these ideas. So that the more stories you write, the more liberating it becomes, because it's like, well, if this one flops, then fine. There's going to be another one and another one after that. I mean, goodness, I just finished up writing a story that is kind of the Greasy Strangler meets a Joe R. Lansdale heist novel. There's probably no fucking commercial audience for that, but it was the one that my brain brought to me. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, so I think that those very specific fears, and those mashups that seem like, is there an audience for that? I guarantee there really is. Like, I mean, the only book on this list that was extremely difficult for me to categorize was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, because it is psychological, but I didn't have a psychological subgenre. So it's like, where else do I put that, And then I really had to drill down and think of like the other elements that play into that book before I decided where it was going to go. And Ian Reid writes a lot of books like that. And I find it so fascinating because I just read his book, We Spread. And one of the major fears that everyone always talks about, like if you have people on your podcast and you say, what is something that scares you? You're a horror author. What is something that scares you? They almost always say, like, oh, the death of a loved one, or, like getting old, or, dying, or some kind of existential like thoughts. And Ian Reid wrote a horror book to deal with getting old. Like, it's such like a real fear for all of us, but there's not a lot of horror books that deal with just like getting old. Like that's just not something that you would find massive amounts of books about. But he wrote this book that really taps a fear that so many of us have, like becoming irrelevant, like losing our memories, like dementia, like Alzheimer's disease, like going into a facility, like being forgotten. Like, he took all of these things that a lot of us think about and made a horror book out of it. And it was like really emotional and really good. Like, and there's just not, I don't even know where I would categorize a book like that in 101 Horror Books to Read Before You're Murdered, because there's not a lot out there like that, even though it's such a common fear.
Right. It's like when you talking about, Michael said something about, which boxes are you going to tick? In books like that, there's other box that's right at the top that says all, and you click that box.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like, I haven't read that book, but I know what you're talking about. you really don't know how to approach some of these writers, and they're doing things that are mind blowing. That it's like they make you think, they make you cry, they make you scared.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's like how many, what, if somebody said, what boxes does it tick in the little thing? All of them, just select all. It's got them
Yeah.
all. They're right
Yep.
there.
Yep. And that's exactly his wheelhouse. Like his other book, Foe, is the same thing. Like it's just very hard to categorize, but it sure was memorable. Like I'll never forget it. Like it was a really weird, freaky, eerie experience and I loved it. So I really enjoy, like, there's just hard and fast rules in horror where it's just like, oh, that's a zombie book, oh, that's a this book. But I think as horror evolves and becomes new and fresh, it's really blending a lot of different genres
Mm-hmm.
together and just reaching a wider audience that way. So people who, you know, strictly read fantasy or sci-fi or romance or whatever can find all of those things in horror.
Mm-hmm. And as society changes, we're finding more and more new categories, societal horror. I was, recently talking with someone just to try to find out if they have. I know about conspiracy theory fiction, but specifically conspiracy theory horror fiction, and that's something that I'm really interested in because our level of paranoia is at an all time high.
Mm,
So it's like,
yeah.
yeah, they kind of go hands in hand. That would be
Yeah.
something to probably click all, select all. You know.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd possibly go about categorizing, the likes of Foe and all of Ian Reid's fiction anyway. Um, because it almost like I just start listing words like existential, beautiful, poetic, dread, and it's like, is that a category? It's like, well,
It should
kind
be.
kind of is now.
Yeah, he
It's-
made it.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, Bob, you said that you haven't read his fiction yet. You absolutely need to. I feel that even
I
though he
have. I
ah,
haven't
okay,
read
it
the.
was that
Yeah.
that specific book. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yes. But yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I have read. Yes.
Yeah, I feel though that like in in general, and I don't exactly know how I'm gonna phrase this, but whilst he's got like a point of fame and notoriety, he's also underread. There are more people who should be reading his work, and actually, like I should absolutely reach out to him and see if we can have a conversation on this as horror because
Yes.
I don't even know if I've heard him on a podcast. Well, no, I
Right.
know I haven't heard him on a podcast. I
Me
know
either.
that, but I don't know if
Hmm.
he's been on many
I don't.
podcasts.
I
And
don't know.
so, yeah, well, we
Yeah,
need to
I
make
would
that
love
happen.
to hear an interview with him. I do think that he has a really fascinating storytelling style. I don't really think there's anything on the market quite like what he's doing. And it is horror. Like, it's interesting. There were a few books that were sort of horror adjacent that
Mm,
I just added to the list because it was horror to me. And I think that horror is kind of where you find it. And it's interesting because there are books that I've picked up where I thought, well, this isn't a horror book, but I'm going to read it anyway because I really like it. And then I flipped it over and read the back of it, and it literally said horror on it. Like
yeah.
I read The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock, and I thought, well, this
Mm,
is just literary. Like this is like a crime fiction, I think. But when I turned it over, it said it was gothic horror. So I just kind of like I find it all the time without even trying to, because I think it's one of those subgenres, or I think it's one of horror is one of those genres that is an emotion, sort of like romance. Like you're gonna find romance in so many places because so many books have people falling in love. It's something that we do. So horror is the same way. Like anytime you tell a story and something really terrible happens, or maybe there's a paranormal or supernatural experience in the book, it can be horror.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think a big horror misconception is that the mainstream try to completely define it in narrow terms, but actually, if you look at horror properly, you can almost find horror in everything. And there are certain aspects of horror within so many stories. And I feel the more horror I read and I watch, the more I find that it's apparent in stories that aren't categorized as horror. I mean,
Yes.
literally last night I rewatched American Beauty for pretty much the first time in decades. Now, obviously, with stuff that has happened with Kevin Spacey, it
Yeah.
gave a whole new level to it. But even if you forget that, I mean, American Beauty is on some level a horror story because every single character is living a lie. They're pretending to be someone that they aren't, where their real nature is completely different to the nature that they are publicly portraying. That's a horror story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like Sarah Langen's book, Good Neighbors, is on my list. And Sarah Langen, her roots are in horror, but I think when I found that book in the bookstore, it was just shelved in general fiction. But other times I've seen it in thriller. So it doesn't necessarily have like a solid home of where it goes. So I like to just kind of like adopt those books for horror and be like, listen, this book escalates like from 0 to 60 and it's terrifying. Another one is Hawk Mountain by Connor Habib. Like, that doesn't necessarily say horror on it, but Connor calls it a horror novel. I call it a horror novel. Like, it is absolutely terrifying the way it escalates and the way that humans treat each other. So, I mean, I would put Hawk Mountain on my list had I read it, prior to writing this book. But it's scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It reminds
Yeah.
me of Anne Rivers Siddon's The House Next
Yeah,
Door,
yeah,
which always has this, it looks like something you'd see like in a romance novel,
yeah. The
and
book cover.
yeah, the book cover is always it's always so pretty and it's full of color and all of that, and I remember I was at a bookstore and I seen a copy of it and I was I was talking with some friends, and this girl was walking by, and my buddy was standing there, and I said, "This book will scare the shit out of you." And the girl looked at it, she goes, "That's a romance book." I'm like, "Oh, give it a shot if you're looking for
Yeah,
horror."
yeah.
And she
Try
goes, "Are you
it.
saying a romance like horror?" I'm like, "No, I'm serious. This book is like a classic horror novel." And she's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Give it here, I'll get it." And we are like secondhand books. I'm like, "Man, she just got fucked up. She's gonna be
Yeah,
so
you're
fucked
just
up
gonna
reading
be
this
like
book.
so
Oh my
fucked.
god."
I mean, look at the cover of Mexican Gothic, like
Mm.
it has this very beautiful woman in a dress with some flowers. You're like, oh, this is going to be,
Mm.
a romance or whatever, even though it says Mexican Gothic right on it. I
Mm.
mean, that's a horror book,
Yeah.
like that has some very significant horror elements in it, that will rock someone's world if they're just looking for, a sweet romance book.
Yeah, and I love that even through talking about different stories, we're coming up with other subgenres too. I mean, yeah, when you mentioned Sarah Langen's Good Neighbor, it's kind of part of that domestic horror subgenre that brings to mind the Stepford Wives. I mean, that is
Yeah.
another kind of horror genre, and I want to see more of that in the world too. I love that kind of like we've got domestic bliss, but actually we're all living in a fucking nightmare. I lap that stuff up.
I do too. Like, I don't know if you saw the movie that came out. I don't know. It wasn't this summer, so it was last summer. Don't Worry, Darling. Um
I did. I'm sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but I'm so I was watching that again, like literally the other week, and as I'm watching it, I'm like, is this a remake of the Stepford Wives? Because there was so much that it had in common. I mean, it was kind of like the Stepford Wives, but with a little bit of Black Mirror and The Matrix thrown into the mix. But
Yes, I
there,
thought so too.
yeah, there were so many
Yeah.
similarities that as soon as I'd watched it, I was like, I need to read up to see, like, is this actually a kind of modern remake? But it turned out that it wasn't, in fact.
But I mean, that's a horror movie, you know? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, you're
yeah.
not, the cover looks very like it's a romance or something. And the
Mm,
title, Don't Worry, Darling. I mean, it's like so, sugar coated. But I mean, underneath the surface of that very beautiful candy aesthetic is this horrifying truth like underneath it. And so those are the kinds of books that I find to be very fascinating. I love the crossover books because I think that there are people who have the wrong idea about horror, and when you can turn them on to something through whatever little pet genre they are appealing to, like if they like Ashley today did a whole recommendation about like podcasts in horror, and they were kind of like thriller horror mashups that have to do with like podcasting. And so that's so fun. Like, I mean, you can find people who really love certain elements, and then you can bring them in and build this little bridge into horror and be like, well, I really think that you would like this horror book. And then they can realize the pool is so much bigger and wider and deeper than they thought. It's not just slasher and gore and whatever other like preconceived ideas they have about the genre. It's so much more than all of that.
yeah, and I love people who are creating podcasts like story podcasts and using that medium to tell a story. So, I mean, of course, like No Sleep is one of the most obvious ones, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
of things like Welcome to Night Vale and Limetown, where there's an ongoing story over not just episodes but years, and like talking about the mythology of the town or the specific incident. It's a really valid way to tell a story. And in fact, Gemma Moore worked on an adaptation of Dear Laura in podcast form, and that worked wonderfully.
That's so cool. That's one of my favorite stories by Gemma too.
Mm,
And it's really fast and really easy to read. There are people all the time who sort of get in like a reader funk, if you will, where they just kind of like it's a slump or something. They just kind of feel like they don't want to read anything. And I always recommend those little novels or novelettes that are
yeah.
just, 80 to 150 pages where somebody could just read it really fast, because it does keep that vibe going the whole time. So, something like The House Next Door, it's like peaks and valleys. It's like, oh, we're at a
Mm,
barbecue, we're hanging out. It's like marriage stuff. It's like this. And then there's horror. And then it's like peaks and valleys again. Whereas something like Dear Laura really starts off with like an eerie vibe and keeps it going like the whole time.
yeah. And if we're talking about books that complement each other, it's like if someone's in a funk, read Dear Laura by Gemma Moore, and then if you like that, read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. That pairing, that'll sort you out. It'll fuck you up, but you won't be in your funk
You
anymore.
won't be in a slump anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah, you'll
yeah,
be you'll
that's
be
it.
looking for your next fix.
Yeah.